still early. We're learning more, but that's the kind of news that I'm getting from people on the ground. And the initial reports are maybe we dodged a bullet, but then as the sun has come up and people have started to look at some of the devastation. Panama City, the electric grid isn't just damaged, it's shredded, and so it'll have to be rebuilt, not just restored. And somebody told me point blank, I talked to them last night and again this morning, they said, Mexico Beach, it's gone. I mean, that's a charming old Florida town. And I think the biggest fear here, of course, this is going to be an incredible challenge for months to come. Federal government's going to have to step up and really be helpful. But this is the kind of event that could change the characteristic of a community. I mean, fundamentally change it and take a decade to recover if it's not done appropriately. So I think this just turned out to be as bad as we thought it was going to be, and potentially worse. We'll learn more throughout the day. And what we know for sure is there's a lot of lives right now that have been disrupted in ways that are going to be very difficult to rebuild, and we have a lot of work ahead. I'm headed to the FEMA headquarters in a few minutes, and then I'll be headed to Northwest Florida. And obviously, I hope my early assessment is wrong. I fear I'm not.
We're looking at video while you're speaking, Senator Rubio, and it is just awful, some of these pictures, down to electrical lines and trees causing a lot of damage and still poses a threat to those in the area. What are you asking for? What does your state need in terms of federal resources?
Well, I think it's going to need a little bit of everything. I know, and I've been updating people on Twitter about sort of the federal resources that are on standby, what the Department of Defense is prepared to offer, and so forth. But right now, I think we're still in the search and rescue operation mission, and I think you're going to see more federal assets deployed in that effort to sort of identify, are there people trapped under some of this, are there lives that have been lost? And then the hard work begins. People talk about restoring power. Without power, you have no cell phone towers. You have no ability to sustain life over periods of time. You can't restore power into lines that are on the ground and feeding into water or other places. The minute you turn that power on, you could kill someone, you could start a fire, all kinds of things happen. This is a very complicated thing that lies ahead, because it's not just a hurricane, it's the water damage left behind. You could have homes that are intact, they look intact, but the water damage is going to force that home to be demolished. But I think initially from the federal government, what we're going to need is additional resources for search and rescue, and we're going to have a massive housing problem here. I mean, we're going to have to shelter thousands of people for extended periods of time who are not going to be able to return to their homes. Even if the homes weren't damaged, they will not be able to return to those homes because of down power lines or obstructions in the road. And so the biggest challenge is going to be sort of, where do we house people that are going to have no place to live here for the foreseeable future. And it's one of the things I'm going to press on when I go to FEMA here in a few minutes after they're done with their briefing.
And obviously, the immediate economic toll will be the headline, in addition to the loss of life that's already been experienced. But then looking out, considering the tourist destination that so many of these cities and towns in Florida are, the long-term effects, I'm sure, will be a big discussion for you this morning. I have to ask you, Senator Rubio, while we have you, about this still missing Saudi journalist. It obviously was a big critic of the Saudi government. This is a big headline that your committee now, Congress, is stepping in. Congress is starting to take the lead on this, and you are a member of the Foreign Relations Committee who wants to know more. What are you asking for? What does your committee want to know?
Well, we have triggered under Global Magnitsky an investigation, and so there'll be sanctions as a result of it. But this is going to go beyond sanctions. Look, I think it's important to know what happened. We've read the same clues everybody else has. Obviously, I'm privy to some additional information which I cannot share. We need to know what happened. But ultimately, let me just say this, and I'm not saying this is what happened, but we're going to learn it soon enough. If the Saudi government ordered a guy to be abducted, they killed him, they chopped him up, they sent a bunch of people in to kill him and chop him up, and then they left, if that's what happened, I'm telling you that what's going to happen here on Capitol Hill is a complete revolt against our policies with Saudi Arabia. And it's unfortunate because they are an important partner in our Middle Eastern strategy to contain sort of Iran's nefarious influence in the region. But if they have gone as far as to lure this guy into this consulate, kill him, cut his body up, and send a crew here to do that, and then they left, if they're responsible for that, and I'm not saying they are, we're going to find out when the evidence is presented. But if that's what happened, then I'm telling you what's going to happen here on Capitol Hill is an effort to completely, fundamentally alter the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia. And I think the administration's aware of that too. And I hope that didn't happen. I hope this gentleman is alive. But I fear that this thing is going to take a negative turn here pretty quickly, especially if any of the stuff that's out there in the press now turns out to be true.
Jamal Khashoggi is the name of that journalist, and obviously you're going to be opening an investigation looking into this further. Any idea what would have inspired an act like you're suggesting?
Well, now I'm speculating, but I can just tell you that governments across the world who think they can get away with silencing critics by eliminating them are doing so increasingly. You've seen in China, for example, they've arrested the head of Interpol, and Vladimir Putin poisons people and kills them. Opponents of Vladimir Putin wind up pretty much routinely dying, falling out of windows in some cases, other times just mysterious heart attacks or just flat out poisoned. And obviously we saw what North Korea did to his own brother because he was running loose around talking. So if this is what's happened here, it would be in line with what you've seen authoritarian governments do around the world. I just hope for Khashoggi's sake, for his fiancée, for his family, that that's not what happened. But I'm telling you, if it is, then there's going to be a complete and total revolt on Capitol Hill on both sides of the aisle about our relationship with the Saudi government. So, and it's an important relationship,
yeah.
but that we cannot allow that to silence us in the face of something like this, if that's what's happened.
Senator Marco Rubio, thanks for calling in this morning. Hopefully you can keep us updated on that story as well as the other big story that we're watching, and that is in the state of Florida and surrounding states and the impact of Hurricane Michael. Thank you for your time, and I know you're heading in for an update with FEMA. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Interesting that he says there is information that he is privy to as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
We'll learn a lot more soon, I'm sure.
We will indeed. Breaking news as the FBI foils a plot to bomb the National Mall in Washington, D.C. on Election Day. What we're learning about a suspect's horrific intentions. Also, President Trump calling out the former Attorney General, Eric Holder, after Holder flips a call for civility.
RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel joins us with her thoughts next, plus new information in the mysterious disappearance of that Saudi journalist as U.S. lawmakers press for answers from the Saudi government.
There's growing opposition to what the Saudis are doing in Yemen, and this just adds to it. I don't think we actually need proof, but there's a lot to indicate that they were involved. But there's enough proof to say that they have been involved with killing civilians in Yemen, and that we do not have a national security or a vital interest in Yemen.
They go low, we kick them. That's what this new Democratic Party is about.
Remember him? That's former Obama-era Attorney General Eric Holder, speaking at a campaign event for Democrats in Georgia. Holder encouraging the crowd to, quote, kick Republicans, saying it's time for the Democratic Party to get tough. Ronna McDaniel is chairwoman of the Republican National Committee. What was your first thought when you heard that from the former top law enforcement officer of the nation?
Well, I think it's very dangerous to hear Eric Holder say when they go low, kick them. And you put that in context with Hillary Clinton saying we can't be civil, with Republicans, Maxine Waters saying if you see Republican cabinet members, go form a crowd around them, tell them they're not welcome here. Cory Booker saying get in their face. Listen, we know passions are high in this country, tensions are high. But when you have leaders of the Democrat Party escalating that, it is going to lead to something dangerous. And we've already seen Sarah Sanders be accosted at a restaurant. You've seen Ted Cruz and Heidi Cruz being accosted. You've seen Steve Scalise being shot. This is a time where leaders of the Democrat Party need to tamp down these passions. And I will say, as chairwoman of the Republican Party, I don't agree with Democrat policies, but I do not want people to accost families at restaurants. I do not want people to form crowds around Democrat leaders. If you have an issue, go vote. Go to vote.gop.com. We can be civil and have disagreements. That is what our country is founded on. I challenge any Democrat leader to step up and say the same thing. None of them have said anything about Eric Holder's disgusting comments, dangerous comments yesterday.
You mentioned, Hillary Clinton, Maxine Waters, Cory Booker, and now the former Attorney General. Is this, you think, a coordinated exercise among Democrats?
I think they're pushing buttons to try and turn out their vote, and they're doing it in a strategic way, and they're escalating tensions to push out their vote. They're paying protesters, they're paying agitators. This is not good for our country. We have always had a strong democracy with differences of opinions, but we come together and govern. And from the beginning of President Trump's term, we've had Democrats boycotting the inauguration,
Right.
putting out the hashtag not my president. They have
Sure.
pushed these tensions to a point where it is going to get dangerous. And it's
He
time
has
for Democrat
called-
leaders. Yeah.
He has called those remarks disgusting, the president has. Chairwoman McDaniel, we have to cut this short because we're awaiting
Sure.
a FEMA briefing. We appreciate your time very much this morning.
Thank you, and thoughts and prayers to those in Florida.
From FEMA headquarters, FEMA Director Brock Long providing an update on Hurricane Michael. Let's listen in.
Critical Lifeline took a hit too. Several hospitals were impacted. Federal forces.
All right, it looks like our feed with Brock Long went down. We'll see if we can get that back up. But an update at this time, obviously critical in the hours since the sun has started to rise down in Florida to see what the actual destruction is in that area since this made landfall yesterday afternoon.
Back to the briefing now. We have it
We
restored.
continue to focus on that area. And then once that happens, the goal is to get the private sector back in. Private sector and getting things back up and running and getting routine pushing forward. But that's a conversation for a later day right now. Right now, the focus is truly on life safety and making sure that we are helping people who may be trapped and pushing through and doing damage assessments to make sure that we fully understand where we need to coordinate our response efforts. Great communication. Spoke with the president, briefed the president last night on Air Force from Air Force One last night. He remains engaged. We processed another declaration request from the state of Georgia. I've personally spoken with Governor Scott as well as Governor Deal this morning to make sure that there were no shortfalls on our end to help them with everything. But again, let's reiterate that this system is ongoing. It's still impacting South Carolina and North Carolina. And we ask citizens to remain vigilant, make sure that they understand all the warnings that are in place, and take this storm seriously as we push forward. So with that, I'm going to push it over to Ken Wetaleski from NOAA, our partners over at NOAA. So Ken, for an update.
Okay, thank you very much. We're looking at now Tropical Storm Michael that is moving across South Carolina. They will continue to rapidly move to the northeast today across North Carolina. This will spread heavy rainfall across those areas that were impacted due by Hurricane Florence several weeks ago. So we are looking at widespread moderate to locally major river flooding to once again resurface over North Carolina, likely beginning today, continuing for the next several days. Fortunately, the system is moving rather quickly, so it'll be off the coast tomorrow, so we don't expect this flooding to hang around as long as it did during Florence. In addition, we're looking at an enhanced risk for tornadoes today across the Carolinas along the track of Michael. Some of these tornadoes could be strong. That's something to watch out for. And there will be gusty winds and rough surf and beach erosion along the Carolinas today as well. Fortunately, we're looking at improving conditions. High pressure builds in for response and recovery efforts along the Gulf Coast through the weekend. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. Next, tremendous partner, that's heavily...
You've been listening to the update from FEMA headquarters in Washington. Brock Long continues with a briefing here. You just heard from NOAA as well, talking about the flooding that still poses a risk everywhere, a wide range of flooding to major flooding. That is going to be watched by rescue crews as they still continue to try to search for anybody who needs help in that area. Brock Long started out by addressing the catastrophic damage that has been seen across the Sunshine State. He made the big point. The goal is to get the private sector back on. So that briefing will continue, and we'll continue to follow all the fallout from Hurricane Michael throughout the morning.
Meantime, a space station on its way to the International Space Station making an emergency landing minutes after that capsule tried to take off. What went wrong and how our astronaut is doing next.
Space crew forced to make an emergency landing because of a critical equipment failure minutes after the launch. The spacecraft was headed for the International Space Station when a problem with the booster separation was detected. NASA saying the two astronauts were safely extracted from the capsule and are both in good condition seen there.
I wonder if we get our $70 million back, because that's what we pay to launch an astronaut on board a Russian rocket.
would know. You follow this
If
stuff.
they don't get up there, do we get our money back? That'll be a question for NASA and I guess the administration to ask. President Trump in Pennsylvania last night trying to rally voters by slamming Democrats over the bitter confirmation battle for Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Listen.
What the radical Democrats did to Brett Kavanaugh and his beautiful family is a national disgrace. It's a disgrace. What they did was a disgrace. You look at Cory Booker, the way he talked, and then you look at what he did. You look at Senator Dianne Feinstein, what she did. The disgraceful behavior, the disgraceful leaking of documents. You look at what they did. You look at the false charges. You look at the false accusations. It was a disgrace. It was a disgrace. But on November 6th, you can vote to reject the Democrats' shameful conduct by electing Republican House. And really, we need it badly. We need these votes, a Republican Senate.
The president took some heat, as you know, for, having this Make America Great Again rally while folks in Florida were feeling the wrath of Hurricane Michael. But he says, look, there were people lined up. They spent all day doing so. It would have been a big disappointment.
And he made that point again on Fox and Friends this morning when he called in. But he has made the point time and time again. This is a man they wanted to destroy. Of course, they want to destroy me, too. The president told that crowd in Council Bluffs, Iowa, when he was talking about that. So he is hoping that this is going to generate more enthusiasm and get the GOP vote out in the midterms. But with the resignation of Nikki Haley the day after the weekend of his swearing in, it was kind of a shock to see him in the White House change the story so quickly with that. So the timing of all of this is very interesting. We'll see if it creates that enthusiasm they hope. All right, we are moments away now from the opening bell on Wall Street. What a day yesterday was. A huge tumble the market took. Will we see more selling this morning? We're going to have an update on what all of this means for your bottom line and your family and your money when that bell rings 2 minutes from now.
Plus, the First Lady, Melania Trump, saying she is the most bullied person in the world, how she's trying to push back on those critics in a big solo interview.
And federal officials thwarting a plot to bomb the National Mall. Details on the man they say planned to use the attack as a way to disrupt the midterm elections.
It's like nothing ever happens around here. And then we got invaded today, and I was like, I knew something bad was going on when they shut the street down.
100 points in a single trading session. Some critics blaming the escalating trade standoff with China. President Trump begging to differ on that.
No, that wasn't it. The problem that I have is with the Fed. The Fed is going wild. I mean, I don't know what their problem is, but they're raising interest rates, and it's ridiculous. The problem, in my opinion, is Treasuries and the Fed. The Fed is going loco, and there's no reason for them to do it, and I'm not happy about it.
Well, that's sort of unprecedented to have a sitting president weigh in so much on not just the markets, but on the actions of the Federal Reserve. And of course, what we've seen so far with the Federal Reserve, interest rates, they have raised interest rates 3 times this year. They're largely expected to raise rates again before year's end. And you just heard the president say the Fed's gone crazy and that he thinks the Fed is making a big mistake. And that sort of tightening of money can lead to a sell-off or a concern, at least in the stock market. So you had that big sell-off yesterday. But, John, I don't know if you've heard of the October effect, and there is such talk of an October effect. We had the big sell-off in '87, the great crash in October, Black Monday. Markets fell 22%. And then you had the October 29th, 1929. That was Black Tuesday to investors. That led to the Great Depression. But no, there's a perception that October is a negative month for the stock
A
market.
very volatile month. Yeah, the president not even happy with Jerome Powell, the guy he appointed to run the Fed, right?
Well, it's fascinating to see him weighing in on the actions of the Federal Reserve. But the idea that interest rates are rising, that inflation could soon be a threat. Let me put the stock market in a little bit of perspective, though. We would still have to see the Dow drop another 1,400 points from where it is today to even see correction mode, which sometimes can be perceived as a healthy action for the stock market. In fact, President Trump himself said it's a correction that we've been waiting for a long time. That can actually make a stock market rally healthier to sort of see a sell-off. So we saw an all-time high last week, right? Nearly saw the Dow top 27,000. Didn't happen, but it was an all-time high. And then we see the selling this week. So it's causing a little bit of panic. I heard Charles Payne on Fox and Friends this morning say, don't panic, don't go close out of your stock positions or adjust your 401k just yet. Take a deep breath. But it was a little scary to see the Dow down more than 800.
I remember when I was paying 13% interest on my adjustable rate mortgage back in the day. So inflation is no fun and, worth fighting. The question is, who's right, the Fed or the president?
So here we are. Dow's off 100 points right out of the gate, 4 minutes into trading. And you're going to get a lot of those nervous investors who think that the end is near and that this rally, this long-term bull market that we've seen may be over, and they might shake out of the market a little bit. Longer-term investors would have to be a little bit more spooked than this to get out. But right now, the Dow just off 92 points after that big 800-point sell-off yesterday. Again, still sitting pretty at 25,500, John Scott. Nothing to sneeze at.
Might be a buying opportunity. Who knows? Yeah. I'll follow your lead on that.
We'll see.
Now, this Fox News alert, a New York man under arrest now, charged with plotting a suicide bomb attack on the National Mall to take effect Election Day. Prosecutors saying Paul Rosenfeld created this twisted plan to draw attention to his political beliefs. Brian Yennis is live in Tappan, New York, where the bomb was built. Brian?
Good morning, John. Well, according to court documents, Paul Rosenfeld, from August to October, built a 200-pound bomb in the basement of his home here in Tappan, New York. We're about 20 miles north of New York City, a quiet suburb. Federal prosecutors say that Rosenfeld planned on blowing himself up and others on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. on Election Day on November 6th. Now, federal prosecutors say that he ordered black powder online to an address in New Jersey. He moved 8 pounds of that black powder to his home here in New York. He built the 200-pound bomb out of a plywood box, filling it with the powder. Now, when the bomb was found, it appeared functional. He installed certain components in the bomb to ensure he was killed in the blast. The 56-year-old conducted tests, building and detonating smaller bombs. Neighbors of this sleepy community here in Tappan, New York, are at a loss for words.
I was shocked. I was like, this is a very quiet area for the most part. And so when I heard that, I was like, I didn't know what to say.
Rosenfeld is believed to have acted alone, John, and the thought here is that if he is convicted, he faces a maximum of 20 years in prison for building that bomb and transporting it.
So his political beliefs motivated all this. Why exactly would he want to do this?
Right, so prosecutors say that Rosenfeld wanted to blow himself up on Election Day to promote an alternate political theory in which government officials are chosen at random. It's called sortition. As to how he was caught, well, he sent text messages to a person in Pennsylvania in which he detailed his plan of attack. That person did not know Rosenfeld and alerted authorities as soon as that person could.
So it was one of those mistaken text messages? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's the mystery behind this as to why this person was texting this person. According to the prosecutors, that person did not know who Rosenfeld was, and when they were getting these messages, text messages and mailed letters, they decided to go to the authorities.
That is a happy accident, I guess you'd say. Brian Yennis in Tappan, New York. Thank you, Brian.
First Lady Melania Trump firing back at critics, saying she's the target of constant attacks by the press and on social media. Ms. Trump was talking about her Be Best campaign, focusing on the well-being of young people and advocating against cyberbullying.
What happened to you personally, or what did you see personally that you thought you wanted to tackle this issue?
I could say I'm the most bullied person on the world.
You think you're the most bullied person in the world?
One of them, if you really see what people are saying about me. That's why my Be Best initiative is focusing on social media and online behavior.
Really a fascinating moment to hear the First Lady, the sitting First Lady, say she's the most bullied person in the world. Really a candid interview.
She knows what it feels like to be the object of a lot of online hate.
Yeah, and a big effort out there to press on with her Be Best campaign as she traveled to multiple countries on her first solo trip abroad.
In the meantime, the Florida Panhandle is in full recovery mode after taking a direct hit from Hurricane Michael. An update on how the National Guard is trying to help the residents of that state and others.
Taking a pass on talking to lawmakers, this as a former top FBI lawyer says he took Rosenstein seriously when he made comments about recording the president. We're going to have a live update on this story.
He mentioned certain things to me that, are very positive about that event, and I would imagine that you'd want to put that down. And frankly, whether you were under oath or not shouldn't matter.
Right.
But he mentioned things to me that I would think would be fine for him to testify.
In the aftermath of the ferociousness of Hurricane, now Tropical Storm Michael, we are awaiting a news briefing from Rick Scott, the governor of Florida. When he steps to the podium there, we will certainly take you back there live. In the meantime, the National Guard is mobilizing in Florida and other states to help the victims of Michael. The Florida Panhandle took a direct hit from the storm, the most powerful hurricane ever to make landfall there. Rick Scott's briefing just ahead, but joining us right now, Lieutenant General Daniel Hokanson, the Vice Chief of the National Guard Bureau. You've got about 1,200 National Guard members ready to go in Florida and more in Georgia and the Carolinas, right?
Yes, sir. Actually, we're up to about 3,000 now in the state of Florida.
Wow. And they're already on the job. What are the? I'm sorry, General. I hate to do this to you. Rick Scott, the governor of Florida, is just stepping to the microphone. We're going to listen in to Governor Scott's briefing.
Good morning. I just received a briefing on Hurricane Michael from Emergency Management right here in Tallahassee. This morning, Florida's Gulf Coast, Panhandle, and Big Bend are waking up to unimaginable destruction. So many lives have been changed forever. So many families have lost everything. Homes are gone, businesses are gone. Roads and infrastructure along the storm's path have been destroyed. This hurricane was an absolute monster, and the damage left in its wake is still yet to be fully understood. Today, the top focus is search and rescue. We prayed that Floridians stayed safe. Last night, the National Guard, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and Florida Highway Patrol drove into darkness and unknown light last night to begin rescues, and there are a lot of other people that went with them. Highway Patrol, DOT, utilities, healthcare workers. I mean, it's the bravery of people doing this is unimaginable. Pray for each of these individuals. Our law enforcement and first responders are heroes and are leaving their families to help others. We cannot thank them enough. This morning, I will be joining the Florida National Guard to survey damage in Panama City and Mexico Beach. The Florida Department of Transportation is leading a massive effort this morning with dozens of crews to clear debris along critical roadways so first responders, National Guard, medical personnel, food, water and supplies, and utility workers can get to where they are needed. Do not get out on the roads today. Do not travel home today. Roads are not open, and you will not be able to get home if you live in or near the coast. I know this has to be very, very frustrating. I know you just want to go home, you want to check on things, and begin the recovery process. We're working as quickly as possible to make that happen. But first, we need your help, your patience, and your understanding that before you return, we have to make sure things are safe. And law enforcement and rescue workers are able to save lives. This also applies to families that sheltered in place. If it is not safe to leave your house, don't leave it. Don't take a chance. Listen to local officials. Do not go out and explore the damage. Let the professionals do that. You will only put your own life and the lives of others at risk if you venture out onto unsafe roads. Again, if you and your family made it through the storm safely, which I prayed that you did, the worst thing you can do now is to act foolishly and put yourself and your family in danger, or keep law enforcement and rescue workers from saving somebody's life. I cannot stress this enough. We also need people to be very safe if you're using a generator. Do not put a running generator in your home. Look at the instructions. Follow the instructions to a T. Be safe. Following the landfall, I requested that President Donald Trump issue a major disaster declaration to allow federal resources to flow quickly into the impacted communities. I spoke with the president before landfall yesterday and again just a few minutes ago, and he is committed to make every federal resource available to help the recover. I was also briefed by the U.S. Coast Guard yesterday. They were pre-positioned in Tampa and Mobile with critical assets and resources during the storm and will be deploying for response. The Coast Guard last night ran 10 rescue missions through the night, and they have already saved lives. I spoke with the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristen Nielsen this morning. I also spoke with Brock Long this morning and met with FEMA's Southeast Regional Coordinator Gracia Check. Homeland Security and FEMA have committed to providing everything we need, and we remain in constant contact with FEMA and all our federal partners who are mobilizing this morning. As I said last night, we are deploying a massive wave of response, and those efforts are already underway. Help is coming by air, land, and sea. We have 35.
That's Florida's Governor Rick Scott telling people, please do not go back to your homes if you evacuated during Hurricane Michael. It is not safe. Let's get back to our discussion with Lieutenant General Daniel Hokanson. He's Vice Chief of the National Guard Bureau. You were telling me you have about 3,000 National Guard forces on duty in the affected area. What is job one for them, sir?
Well, sir, basically was U.S. Northern Command as the synchronizer, working very closely with them in support of the lead federal agency to make sure that we're there to respond any needs that our citizens have in the impacted area. And as the governor mentioned, one of the highlights last night was out of Panama City. They had lost communications with parts of Mexico Beach. And so about early this morning, about 1 o'clock, we had two of our teams in their tactical vehicles link up with local law enforcement and drive into the Mexico Beach area. Unfortunately, due to the conditions, they had to actually exit their vehicles and walk the last mile, but they were able to link up with local law enforcement and the fire department in Mexico Beach, as well as about 15 to 20 citizens who had sheltered overnight. The good news story is none of them were injured, and there was no one missing at the time when they were there. So as the governor mentioned, the response effort started very early this morning once the hurricane was clear of the area.
Typically, the Coast Guard takes the lead on search and rescue in situations like this. Do you have Guard troops who are doing that job as well?
Absolutely, sir. We have aviation units throughout the state, also within Georgia and also the accompanying states. And U.S. Northern Command also coordinates a lot of the active duty assets to make sure that they're ready and available whenever they're needed.
But finally, you know, these Guards members, they have families and homes in the affected area as well, don't they? How do they walk away from that to help others?
Well, sir, it really goes back to our motto of always ready, always there. And when you look at the Gulf states, they're always ready because they train for this. And when we talk about always there, because they're in the communities every single day, they're usually the first responders in coordination with the local first responders. And because their units are there, they're familiar with the area, and they really kind of keep an eye out for each other. And, you know, our hat goes off not only to their families, but also their employers that allow them to do this when they're needed to just walk away and help out their fellow citizens.
They are doing a great job, and they've got a huge job ahead. Lieutenant General Daniel Hokanson with the National Guard. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John.
Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle calling for an investigation after the suspicious disappearance of a journalist known as a major critic of the Saudi government.